This is a story you'll definitely want to hear to the very end. I was always the invisible one. No one really noticed me, which suited me just fine. I was like a ghost in my own home, unseen by parents busy with their own lives, and by classmates absorbed in their gadgets. My life was boring, predictable, and I was content with that, until I found it. It was an old, abandoned building on the outskirts of town, a former factory, long closed due to bankruptcy. Most kids stayed away, spreading rumors of ghosts and evil spirits dwelling inside. But I, Evelyn, was never afraid of such things. I was always curious about what others avoided. One particularly rainy day, when all my friends were cooped up inside, I ventured out there. The rain hammered on the roof, creating an eerie yet strangely soothing melody. I wandered through the empty workshops, among rusty machinery and cracked walls, until I stumbled upon a small door hidden behind a pile of old crates. It was locked, but the lock looked flimsy. My heart quickened. It only took a few minutes to pry it open with an old wrench I'd found on the way. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow, dark corridor. The air was stale, heavy, but I wasn't scared. On the contrary, a sense of anticipation for something unknown ignited within me. The corridor led to a small, windowless room. It was absolutely empty, except for a solitary metal chest in the corner. The chest was old, darkened with age, with heavy latches. I tried to open it, but it was firmly locked. I spent the rest of the day there, trying to find a way to open it, but to no avail. I returned there every day after school. It became my personal obsession. I brought tools with me, screwdrivers, hammers, even a crowbar. My hands were calloused, my clothes constantly stained with dust and rust. I skipped dinners, made up excuses to my parents, just to spend a few more hours in that dark room, trying to open that damned chest. And then, after weeks of persistent attempts, one of the latches gave way, then the second, the third, and finally, the last one. With a soft creak, the lid of the chest lifted. Inside, there was no gold, no jewels, no ancient artifacts I had dreamed of. Inside lay a collection of old photographs, neatly arranged by date. They depicted people I had never seen before, a man and a woman, a young girl, a small boy. In some photos, they were happy. In others, they looked worried or sad. At the bottom of the chest, I discovered a diary tied with a faded ribbon. It was handwritten in an illegible script, and on the first page, a name was written, Sarah. I began to read. It was the diary of a young woman who kept it in the middle of the last century. She described her life, her dreams, her love. She wrote about her husband, John, and her children, little Emily and tiny Thomas. The diary was full of joy, but with each page I read, the tone shifted. There were disturbing entries about financial difficulties, about Thomas's illness, about a constantly growing sense of hopelessness. And then the entry stopped. The last entry was dated exactly 50 years ago. A chill ran down my spine. Why was this diary here? What happened to Sarah and her family? I spent the rest of the evening trying to find information about Sarah's family. I searched old newspapers, city archives, even obituaries, and I found it. A small note in a local newspaper dated the same day as Sarah's last diary entry. It spoke of a fire that destroyed the family home, in which the husband and son perished. The woman and her small daughter, Emily, were missing. A strange feeling came over me. It was as if I held in my hands a piece of their lives, their pain, their tragedy. I continued to dig deeper. I visited local cemeteries, reviewed church records. And then, after a few weeks, I stumbled upon Sarah's grave. She was buried next to her husband and son, but at the bottom, in small letters, it was written, "And her daughter, Emily, who lived long and happily." I was confused. Why did the newspaper say Emily was missing then? I reread Sarah's diary, trying to find clues, and then I noticed something. There were several missing pages in the diary, neatly torn out, as if they had never been there. It dawned on me, Sarah was hiding something. I returned to the factory, found that same chest. On its inner side, under a layer of dust, a date was scratched, the same date as the last entry in the diary and the same as the date of the fire. And next to it, barely discernible, a scratched letter E. I understood. Sarah didn't die in the fire. She survived, and Emily too. But something happened, something that made Sarah tear out pages from her diary and hide it here. I returned home, looking through old family albums. In one of them, on the very last page, I found a photograph of my great-grandmother, a young woman with deep, sad eyes, and the caption, "Emily." My great-grandmother, Emily. I inherited her name. My parents named me Evelyn, which was a diminutive of Emily. A wave of shock, then understanding washed over me. My great-grandmother was that very Emily, Sarah's daughter. She survived that fire, but what happened afterward? Why did she never speak of her past? Why was her mother's diary hidden in the factory? I felt a chill run down my spine. My own family held such a secret. I tried to talk to my parents. They were evasive, saying these were old family stories best left undisturbed. But I couldn't stop. I felt I had to know the truth. And then, one evening, when I was almost despairing, my grandmother, my father's mother, called me to her. She was old and frail, but her eyes still shone with wisdom. She told me the truth. Emily indeed survived the fire, but the fire was no accident. Sarah, Emily's mother, was desperate to escape debt. Her husband, John, was a gambler and had accumulated huge debts. When collectors began to threaten their lives, Sarah decided to fake her family's death to collect insurance money. She set the house on fire while her husband and son slept, but something went wrong. The fire got out of control, and Sarah herself died in the flames, unable to escape. Emily, still a tiny infant, was saved by a passerby who mistook her for an orphan. My great-grandmother, Emily, grew up without knowing her real family, her tragedy. She was adopted. She lived with that pain, that emptiness, her whole life, not knowing what truly happened. And only shortly before her death, she told my grandmother about that chest in the factory, about the diary she never dared to read to the end, about her mother who so desperately tried to save her children that she took such a terrible step. I held Sarah's diary, the photographs, and looked at them with completely different eyes. This wasn't just a tragedy. It was a story of desperate love, of hopelessness, of a choice that shattered lives. I realized that my search led me not just to a family secret, but to the understanding of how complex and unpredictable human destiny can be. My inconsequential life would never be the same. Now I knew that behind every quiet person could lie a whole abyss of untold stories. If you enjoyed the story, subscribe to the channel and you'll hear even more captivating tales.